Hello everybody, are we live? We should be live. Let me just recruit the one faithful watcher. And then we shall jump right into the topics. Those lovely, lovely topics. Once we confirm that this is all working lovely. Because we don't want to do a stream where nothing's working lovely. TikTok, TikTok, TikTok. Sorry about the boring opening. We'll get into it soon. Confirming, confirming, confirming. Oh dear. Coffee drinkers. We'll wait around. Do for people to come in. Because even though it's a live recording of a video that you'll be able to watch back later, it's always nice to have some sort of interaction. We'll just get this linky out there. Hoppity over to the let's take that bit out because we don't want that. It's always amazing when you post a link. It's like, we're gonna add at YouTube. And it's like, no, don't do that. We can't be doing that. Someone has asked on Twitter, what would Joe do? Well, Joe would refer to everybody else and get his overlords to decide for him. Because he's not capable of making any decisions by himself. Any decision he takes is what blanket he's going to use for his next nap. He's completely out of the picture. But as you can see by the title, the left, those dreaded left, versus the conservatives, who don't like leftism. I will explain why. A morality. Is it objective, or is it purely subjective? We'll go over that, because that's just a conflict of definitions. Nobody likes the conflict of definitions, because that's what goes and ruins the world anyway. Do we like ruining the world? No, we like keeping the world sane and whole and yanus. Madness in the world. It can all be solved. I will talk about that. Oh dear. Looks like at some point I would need to get a desk. It's going to be slightly hard to arrange. No space for such things. So forgive the wobbles. That's just part and parcel of this. I mean, I have a solid surface. I could set it up on there and all the zoom and whatnot, but that'll come later. Just waiting on the one person who wanted this video to arrive. They'll be here soon, don't worry. And obviously I can download and re-edit this later, which I will do if this turns out well, which it should do. And I like the thumbnail. Who else likes the thumbnail? It's quite straightforward and to the point, not flashy, not doing anything fancy. Because fancy isn't what we need right now. How are we sounding? Are we all good to go? Looking good? Sounding good? Let me know so I'm not making a fool of myself. It might do. Give me the A-OK and the thumbs up. Are we good? Are we loud and clear and hoo-hurry? Sounding fabulous. Right, well. First topic, why the left will fail. If you haven't noticed, the left have to achieve everything through propaganda and inventing a problem that they have to try and solve. It doesn't come naturally. It's not born out of anything that radically ruins anybody's life. Because there was no problem. We were all happily getting along with our lives and things were stable and nice. And then the only reason they piped up is because everybody who wasn't them decided that the things that needed solving in life just so happened to be racist and doomed and out of bigotry and hate for something. And that comes from a twisting of language. It's like a problem is only a problem when it's a problem. It's not a problem if you have to invent the problem. And they only ever invent problems through changing the meaning of words. And so if Jordan Peterson wants to know when the left goes too far, it's when they start fiddling with the language. Political correctness. That's where it starts, that's where it should end. As soon as you have to modify your own speech to cater to someone else's sensibilities. Dun, 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 everything goes wrong and plows into a downward spiral. So why will they fail? Because nothing they ever do is born out of anything natural. They have to manufacture it. And when you start manufacturing things, everybody who knows that things naturally occur and come about because of how people are, they're going to provide some pushback and some resistance to it. And that's why their whole movement is centered on tearing things down, getting rid of stuff, having to reinvent the world in their own image. And that's why it will fail. Because they'll get to a point, and they've already gotten to the point, where everything that they want to introduce to bring about their own world is it's far too aggressive, far too in your face. It can't be avoided. They take the mask off and just reveal their true intention. And then when their true intention is to come after your children to try and change the world from the bottom up by acting top down, they're trying to replace what comes naturally. And we can't be having that. That's a very short explanation of it. But first, they modify the language to try and invent a problem that doesn't exist. By saying that something that was never a problem is now a problem, and it needs to be tackled in some way. And then after they've changed the meaning of words to try and get their way and invent this magical problem, they lean into saying that someone is a problem and someone is a solution. Monsters is one way to describe it. They have to creep in through the back door and try and scare the shit out of you. And that's when you notice. It's like, why are you doing that? Why are you being so aggressive in trying to scare people towards a problem that nobody knew existed until you piped up? Which shows that it's just all born out of language manipulation. And this is why they go after the past, because nothing in the present reflects what they're going on about. They're saying that all the problems of today are born out of the way things were in the past. And because we've established this natural way of being, and it's just come about because it was seen as socially beneficial and beneficial to the individual, they have to tear it all down and try and start again. So they have to go way, way back and highlight every single instance of where they think this system came from. And it's like, it's not a built system. It was not man-made. It was not manufactured for the benefit of anybody. It came around because things naturally occurred that were seen as beneficial, and the more they benefited the world, the more they were kept. And keeping what is beneficial is the ideal of conservatives and conservatism. It is born out of nature. Because human beings are natural beings. And the more we adhere to the natural way of life, it seems the better our lives are. You know, you're in the world, you have a biology, the world has so many resources. It's what can you do to adapt your biology to the resources to survive as one and then prosper. Exactly. We were all comfortable. We knew the way things were and we were all getting on with it. And so that comes to the conservative view of the world and how it will make the left fail. So the conservative view of the world is, to start with, you are a single biological being in the world. I'll sum it up with child in a field. That's where I got that idea. And so you are entered into the world in your biological state, and then you have to know what to do with it. And when you aren't told what to do with it, and you're free to do with it what you will, you lean towards what is most natural. You don't try and manufacture a situation and manipulate people into things. You are like, I am here, this is what I need to do to benefit myself. And then when you see the benefit to yourself from doing things, generally, you want to share them. And you're like, oh, if you replicate what I'm doing, born out of nature, then you will become a naturally flourishing being. And so that ties into the whole individual. Because conservatives are born out of the individual. It's down to the individual's morality and their self-reflection and how they judge themselves and what they're doing in the world, and then how other people respond to it. So you form relations by not upsetting the balance of the relationship itself, by introducing things that don't need to be there. And so we all become one through the relationship of the trust that people have self-reflection. And out of self-reflection you get empathetic reflection. And then when you judge yourself, and you can judge others by the own standard that you set yourself, that's how you build these relationships, based on trust and maintaining the honor of being human. And then back to the left, you'll see that they attack everybody for being human, and that they have to change what human is and pervert it and screw it up. Because everything they do is to separate you from being a biological being. Does the left have a solution for poverty and stuff, or is it just give everyone everything? They don't have a solution. Their solution is to tear down capitalism, because in capitalism you get your own stuff and you decide what you want to do with it, private property rights. And they're saying because the individual can decide to use their wealth or whatever they have for their own prosperity. They're not sharing it to make everyone prosper. But the point is to set the example. That's what conservatism is. You establish that you are the example of the most natural way of being, and you live in that example, and you produce that example, and then you expect others to view that example as being the best example of what a human can be, and then everybody adapts. They see it, they're like, oh, we do things that way, do we? And everybody prospers because of the natural order that comes out of it, because no one set out to harm anybody or to disadvantage anybody. Conservatives do not build systems to oppress people, but the left will say, oh, they do, because they place you under individual responsibility, and if you have to be responsible, then you have no freedom because you're restricted in what you can do. And that's why they try and separate the sort of like soul of a person, what a person is without the biology. That's why they try and take it away and extract and say that you're not someone in the world or of the world. You aren't, natural or biological or existing. You are some ethereal floating soul without any responsibility or connection to the world whatsoever. And that the only way to enjoy freedom from oppression is to do as thou wilt. And that's why it's often related to as being destructive, because it doesn't take into consideration the impact that you have. And that's why the left have to pervert everything. And the whole LGBT thing, when it was just the LGB, as we've seen with the LGB Alliance being hounded by the LGBT, is because the T's are a perversion of nature, and apparently, according to the left way of thinking, homosexuality or bisexuality, or just fulfilling your lustful pleasures against, the way that nature intended, that sex was for procreation and not just for the lust of it. And then it goes on to, well, how can we disturb biology enough to make everybody separate their soul of someone, or, the personality, the temperament, everything born out of the brain that you project on the world through the use of your biology? They want to separate it, because then you can pervert it enough. How conservatism is the natural way of being. Yes, because you find conservatism is about conserving the relationship that you have with yourself and the world and with everybody else in the world. It's like you find what works and you keep it, because the destruction of it leaves an empty space, a vacuum that you have to try and fill. And that's when people get lost and they have no purpose, and they turn into these wild, rabid activists that tell you that you have to destroy your body or lead it towards the perverted space. And then you get people arguing, oh, what are you on about? We're not trying to pervert anything. We know that we're human. And it's like, well, if you know that you're a human, why aren't you doing what humans naturally do, which is following their biology? You have a body. What is your body to be used for in the world? And it's to construct and preserve a way of being that sustains, that leads to flourishing, that doesn't do harm, that, nature, natural. What is? You don't disturb what is, you accept what is. But the left don't do that. They view what is as oppressive. And so they have to make an order that appeals to their ideals. But their ideal is to take away biology. And that's where you see it. Age isn't a factor, people are people. So you can do whatever you want to people of whatever age. And that's why they come after children. Because they don't see children as needing an example. They see children as these individual agents without biology. It doesn't matter how old someone is or how long they've been in the world or what their experience of the world is. It's like you can teach them whatever you like through propaganda and levering it on them. And that's why they want to sexualize children, and that's why it's perverted and fucked up, and why they will fail. Because conservatives in the world know that you don't mess with the biology of things, or the natural way of being, or what is. So you don't lead children into perversion. You leave them be. You wait for them to develop naturally by following the example. And you are there to set the example. And when you remove yourself as being an example of what people should be, and you turn into this ethereal mess of, oh, my soul can do what it wants, and it can ignore biology. Nearly sucked into the left a long time ago. Glad I didn't go on the bandwagon. Glad it's destined to fail. Do you think there's a larger agenda at play encouraging the left to be the way they are in order to cause problems between people? Well, they're all about unification into some singular collective that is supposed to work for the betterment of mankind by inventing a system where we all flourish by getting equally, instead of people being individuals with their individual responsibility who obtain stuff through the merit and their contribution to the world. And this was brought up in another live stream of Hassan Piker. He didn't understand. There was a chat between Jordan Peterson and someone else about how there's a difference between greatness and power. It's like the left want to be this all-powerful monolith that dictates to the world the way they should be, so that nobody has the individual freedom to flourish outside of it or set themselves as an example that's above anybody else. It's like we're not allowed to witness greatness. And that's why they don't believe in the meritocracy. But when you get rid of the meritocracy, what is there? If nobody's allowed to be seen as a better example through the merit of their action, then everybody's just seen as this plain useless actor who can't do anything great. They can't invent anything. They can't express anything. And then it turns into equilibrium. That's why that film was called what it was called. No one's allowed to display any emotion or artistic ability or talent or merit in any area. You all have to be this plain, compliant, sort of like dull, zombie-ish, just doing what the state tells you to do. And then when you accept the state as being the people who ordain how you have to be, that's when it all goes wrong. Because that's man-made order. That's not natural. No one should dictate what humans have to be. You are what you are. And that's where rights come from, and why they're inalienable. Because there are certain things that you can do as a human being without needing to take advantage of anybody else to be able to achieve them. And that's why if you read the US Constitution, which was born out of the UK Bill of Rights, which was an extension of the Magna Carta, because it got rid of that man-made order. It said that no man was above any other. And then you select the leaders based on their merit, instead of them being tyrannical and trying to beat everybody into submission to achieve what you feel is the ideal construction of the world. The state isn't the mechanism of construction of a world order. But that's what you see with the Great Reset and the NWO and the WEF and all of these international groups. They want to make the order of the world. And people don't like that because it's very unnatural, and they know it's tyrannical. Because you're ordaining sort of a king with ultimate tyrannical rule over the world. But the only way that works is through oppression. And so all of the left hand speaking about, we know that the state's an oppressive mechanism that tries to build an order to maintain power, and because that power was established through conservatism, and that that brought about a natural order that worked for the world, and that's why it was successful. And that's why you see the English-speaking world that was born out of conservatism and taking down that no man was above any other. That's why it flourished, why it was successful, why it became the sort of like the platform for, I'm not going to say best, but the countries that most people would want to live in. That's why they flood towards the English-speaking world, because it's natural. It got rid of the mechanism of power over people. It was just, okay, we need something to protect the order, the natural order, that was just born out of the way people are and how they should interact to preserve humanity on Earth. And that's why the left always scream that conservatism's evil and oppressive, because it tells you how to be. It's like, no, it has established an example of something that works because it is born out of the natural way of being. That's why they want to tear it down and pervert it and get rid of nature and put in this, we're capable of doing this, that, and the other, and we should have the freedom to do it to everybody. And it's like, no, because like Arnold Schwarzenegger said, freedom comes with responsibility. And it's like, yes, the responsibility of self-reflection and knowing that you're an example to everybody else. So you should be what you want everybody else to be. You shouldn't try and shape everybody else into some sort of ethereal being with complete and absolute no rules, because they don't exist in a body, and they're not doing harm to anybody if the only harm is to sensibility. And that's where they get it from. It's a battle of mindsets, because they don't see people as being a natural example of people. They have a lens on the world. And if you want to go further into it, that's when you get Marxism and the I don't know whether he's a psychologist or a philosophist, but Immanuel Kant and Marcuse. And that's why they say the only way that they achieve communism is through a tyrannical force that oppresses you into getting rid of your humanity, basically, and being an actor of the state. And you can't have that. The state isn't above you. The state isn't what establishes anything. They're there to protect people from tyrants. They're not there to be the tyrant. Because then they become the oppressive force. Right, it's hard for me to understand just why they can't see what they want. Basic oppression. They're actually mental. Yes, they're all mental. They are consumed with their own mind. They ignore everything else and they're trapped inside their own head. That's why they can't let it go. That's why they say that everybody else is stupid or ignorant or, a supremacist. Because they know that a way of being is born out of setting the example. But their example is that you are just a brain. You are just your personality. There's nothing that attaches you to the world apart from what you want. And if you can't succeed through your own merit for other people to recognize that you have something to offer that makes them want to give you something in return, that's what they can't get out of. That's why the left will fail, because they scream and shout and demand and say this is how it needs to be, and you're like, no, you're not showing anything worthy of sort of like the reward of compassion. And I think it does come down to compassion, because the left always say, oh, we're being compassionate because we want to bring everybody up to a standard. And it's like, no, because you get rid of people who are great in the merit of their actions and you tear them down to the lowest denominator. That's the way communism works. It's like, to achieve the equality that they keep begging that they want, no one can be an example of greatness or of like human ability. Even if it comes down to them being sort of like morally sound in their example, they don't harm anybody. They're altruistic through, keeping themselves to themselves and just being a good person. And then you have to ask, oh, what is morality born out of? And it's born out of the natural way of being. It is a yardstick to measure your impact on the world. And that's why I would say it is objective. Morality exists. It is a thing. And it is a thing because you are supposed to judge your own actions. And then instead of judging everybody else first, you should judge the example that you're setting. And if someone differs from that example, and they're trying to be tyrannical or impress themselves upon someone else, that's where you get morality from. It's the self-judgment versus the empathetic judgment. It's the in-between yardstick. And it exists because we all do it. It's natural to do it. And then that goes full circle. If morality is objective, it exists because it is the way that you set the example. And then people are like, oh, well, there's different moral systems and everybody judges what they do differently. And it's like, yes, they do. But the reason that they do that is because they're not trying to set the example themselves. They lack the self-reflection. They think that they're doing what they want to achieve what they want, and the impact that it has on everybody else is regardless, as long as they're flourishing, And that comes around to leftism. Leftists view morality as subjective because they detach it from any self-reflection. You know, they lack that. They don't judge what they're doing. They judge what everybody else is doing. And if what everybody else is doing is showing an example that they don't agree with, they don't want to see as a good way of being, they're all like, oh, you're being tyrannical and oppressive and fascist because you're trying to set an example and you're saying I'm going to hold to my example. And they don't want there to be an example. They want people to be absolutely free of everything. You know, there will be no laws, there will be no marriage, there will be, you know, no children. Everybody is just a thing, an object. They objectify everything. They separate it from the human experience. And they believe that your body is just an object. And that's where you get transsexuals and transhumanism from. It's just a vessel to do with what you want. It has no bearing on anything. And that's why the argument between leftism and conservatism, or right-wingism, as everybody likes to call it, but it's not. You know, that's why I said that there aren't degrees of being right-wing. There are two steps of the right-wingedness. And it's basically you are a conservative and you do want to set the example of human flourishing. And so you adhere to monogamy and marriage and procreation and being the example for your children. And a meritocracy whereby you earn things through the merit of the goodness of the action and what it provides for people. You know, and the only extension of that is to say that there should be no man-made order whatsoever, and that there should be no force upon you established by man that stops you from being the free individual to set that example. And that's where you get anarchism. It's like far right is anarchism. And that's where you get horseshoe theory, because the left are all like, oh, socialism is anarchism because it gets rid of the state being the mechanism that provides things for you. And it's like, yes, but socialism leads to communism where you get the state to enforce it. And then it becomes tyrannical and fascist. And fascism is always born out of going left. You don't get fascism if you have anarchism, because then there's no one using a police or a military to control anybody's actions. Well, that's why anarchism doesn't work, because then it separates itself into the empires again, and people being like, no, my way of being is the best way of being. And it's like, no, there's one way of being that's the best way of being, and that's the way that it is to nature, you know. But leftism comes into degrees. There's people who want to fuck about with language to try and, you know, make you think differently and get rid of conservatism. You know, they do. The freely expressive, the artists of the world, you know. You want to show you things that are beyond human nature. And it starts with getting rid of the language, giving everything a double meaning. And then that's when it affects the social institutions, you know, the police and the healthcare and the education. Because police are there to enforce laws, but laws are supposedly man-made, and laws aren't supposed to be man-made. They're supposed to be derived from nature. But nobody gets that, you know. And then with healthcare, oh, everybody's supposed to have the most advanced healthcare available to them at all times for absolutely nothing. And it's like, yes, but people have to provide that healthcare to you. And for that, there has to be resources to be able to do it. And when you make something and you provide that resource that provides that healthcare, it's seen as an example of innovative greatness. It's like, oh, this can help many, many people. And it justifies a reward, a thank you for it being there. And so if you get rid of any cost to healthcare and say, oh, if you're going to provide healthcare for someone, it has to be absolutely free, and it gets rid of any innovation because people don't want to contribute to it. Because it's like, why am I helping keeping people alive or healthy when they're not going to use being alive or being healthy to do anything for the world? It's selfish. And the left think being selfish is being an individual who can set an example for which people reward. When it's the left who are selfish because they say we demand a reward just for existing. And that reward is that you don't try and set yourself as an example above anybody. You don't innovate, you don't invent, you don't create. And you see that in communism all over. That's why they have to destroy art. That's why they have to destroy history. They have to get rid of any example of someone that you might want to be, so that you are this blank canvas. You separate the personality and the soul and what it is to be a person from anything real. You live outside of reality. And so yes, that's why they are all mental, because they think that you are just a mentality. And it's why they go on about right-wing extremism is telling people that they're not being the right example for people. And when you tell someone that they have a fault with the way they're trying to be, that's tyrannical and oppressive and fascist, because everybody should be allowed to be what they want to be and achieve what they want to achieve. And it's like, yeah, but when they achieve what they want to achieve, and if that achievement is for benefit, you said that they're being too good. No, you can't do that. Can't reward that. And that's why it will fail. Because you'll reach the ultimate state of being, and that'll be flat and dull and all at the lowest denominator. And that's why it always ends up in starvation and genocide. Because nobody does anything for anybody else as an example of being good or being moral, or having that self-reflection. I should be this way because if I am this way and that sets an example for someone and they are that way, it benefits everybody mutually. I hope I'm explaining this well enough. Feel free to ask away. If anybody has any questions, you know where to leave them in the comments down below. And if this has been a thorough explanation and you've enjoyed it, please subscribe and press the alert bell. Do all of those stereotypical things. Leave the video a like. Is there anything that I haven't covered yet? Congrats on your existence. Yeah, but that's all the congratulations that they want to put in. Well done, you're in the world. Yay. Good, good. I like knowing that I've actually done something that might be slightly educational and explaining. We all like the explaininess. Like to know why they bum Islam? Well, Islam is a hyper-conservative order, but it comes from theocracy, and so they don't believe that Islam is a mechanism of the state, even though in Islamic countries, Islam is the totalitarian order of the state. You know, the governments in Islamic countries are just enforcing Islam. And so they turn to it and they think, oh, look, they're a free people without any man-made order, and they just do what they're going to do, and that's a natural way of being. And it's like, well, it would be if it wasn't a tyrannical, oppressive, top-down order of hyper-conservative authoritarianism. You know, they violently impose that you should act the way that somebody said God ordained upon them. You know, Islam isn't born out of nature and arriving at it the way nature intended. Islam is born out of a man, Muhammad, who impressed himself upon the world after failing to attract people through his nature. You know, he came along and he was like, oh, we should be this way, and I'd like people to follow the example that I'm setting. And then when people didn't, because they'd already came to their own conservative, natural, you know, moral way of being because of what came before Islam. And then that's when he went mad. When he disappeared, he went into a cave and he's like, I've been ordained by God to give you these things. I don't understand with chalk and cheesy. You'd have to explain that to me for me to explain it. But yeah, and then when Muhammad went off in the cave and apparently heard the word from Allah, and he came back and he says, I have received word from God and you shall do it this way. And then he just went all tyrannical and he was like, oh, you can take women for what you want them to be, and you can take other people's riches, and you can take other people's territory because they're attacking you by... It's leftism. Left and Islamic. Because that's what leftism is. It's man-made order on the world, because you can't see anybody else as being the example of greatness. You have to be the greatest. You have to be the best. You are the most compassionate. You know, you will solve the world's problems. And that's where it comes from, because Islam is a man-made order disguised within a religion. You know, it's conservative authoritarianism by man. It's like, we have found the most natural way of being, and you will be this, instead of letting people be free to explore it. You know, that's why apostasy is met with death, and if anybody comes in who doesn't follow this order, you have to tax them and oppress them, or kill them. You know, any system in which it impresses death as the penalty for not following it is man-made, oppressive, and tyrannical. And the left absolutely love it. That's why they bum Islam. Because Islam is all like, oh, we've established this way of being because someone presented us with the word of God. And it's like, no, he abused the fact that religion existed to tell other people. Why don't the left just start? They have started statism. That is their religion. Statism. The control mechanism. You know, the bowing down to man-made power. They have started that religion. They are a religious order. And they do exactly what Islam does. You know, comply or die. That's why everybody gets confused between left wing and right wing when you introduce religion into it. Because religion is just a belief system born out of, somebody's way of setting an example. Religions came about because someone examined the way that people are and the way that people could be to flourish in their relationships in a society. Yeah, there we go. And it's all about the psychology of it. And they take the psychology of religion and they're like, oh, if we can establish our religion and put in our own deity. But it's like, no, you're trying to man-make something that wasn't man-made. Religion isn't man-made. You don't establish the order or the tenets of a religion through you don't you don't invent them. They are witnessed and examined as ways of being from the example of just observing humanity. And the left can't stand that. Because when you examine humanity and you realize that humanity has to be the example for the rest of humanity, that's supposed to naturally come about through self-reflection and empathetic reflection and, being polite and respectful and, not harming people. And showing merit, You do things to the best of your ability, and if people witness that you're the best at it, they follow you in the example to try and replicate that greatness. And that's what elevates everybody. That's what provides innovation and invention and art and, what we witness as beauty of form meeting function. And if beauty is form meeting function, and the most beautiful thing in the world is when you reach the pinnacle of something's ability to be what it is and to do what it does. That's what God or gods were born out of. They are the pinnacle example of form meeting function. They are the ultimate beautiful being. That makes sense, doesn't it? And then the problem with Islam is that they didn't reach the example of a god just through witnessing humanity. A human came along and said, oh, this is what God has ordained. And it's like, it doesn't work like that. That's why you shouldn't take it literally. It is all metaphorical. It is all human beings witnessing or knowing what would be the best through the merit of it. And then you say that it's naturally ordained by God, Lovely definition of gods. Yeah, gods are the perfect form meeting the perfect function. And that is the universe. That's why they say that God created the universe, because it's perfectly balanced. It meets form and function. It does what it does, and it is what it is. And it does it to the best of its abilities. It is the ultimate merit. That's why it's vast and expansive and infinite. Because it just keeps going, doing what it does. And that's why it's born out of human existence and the ability to think of that. Because if there wasn't human beings with self-reflection and, a soul or anything inside of them that could reflect upon it, then the idea of God wouldn't exist. But it's not that God is a being that magically performed all of it. It's that humans witnessed, the meeting of form and function and the beauty of it. And they said, okay, the ultimate way of being is to meet form with function. And that's where conservatism and natural way of being, and that no man is above any other man, and that you are to set the example, and the way of the example is to be the creator the creator, the protector, that which gives life, kind of thing. That's why you have God, which is ultimate form and function and the perfect way of being and what should naturally be. And then men are supposed to follow that, what God is. And then women are supposed to be an extension of man and assist man in preserving that form and function and that example of way of being, by not leading them astray, by not tempting them, by not giving in to what we call the sins, as it were. Supposed to keep them on track. And then in return, man and women creates child. And then you're supposed to work in tandem as being the beauty of form and function to set the example of the child to do the same. That's why the whole conservative man, woman, child, two-parent family, that's where they all came from. And that's why conservatism tries to preserve that. And that's why the left have to pervert that, because they don't want form and function to mean beauty. They want beautiful to just be whatever they ordain beauty to be. Oh, it looks pretty. Isn't it fabulous and glamorous? That's where that whole attitude comes from. Why do you think it leads men into being confused enough to want to become women? Because they see women as the example of beauty, of form and function. It's like, I appreciate women to be the example that I want to be, so I'm going to try and be a woman. It's like, no, because there's a beauty in men of meeting form and function as well. And that's why they need to change the definition of words. Because when you don't have the example of language to tell you that, and you tear down the meaning and make everything doublespeak to make an example not what the example is. You can't personify things in singular words that produce you with a conceptual idea of what anything is supposed to be, because nothing's supposed to be what it is. Everything's supposed to be what you want it to be. You can change meaning. You can change the form and function of anything just by using a different word to describe it and producing a different concept. That's why I came up with that order of things. You have perception in a context, which creates a concept of which you self-judge, which then you can empathetically judge, which brings you to a revelation that builds a principle which you act upon, and then the form and function of that action to bring about the best example is what we call God. And you need all of it to work in an order so that all of it can be what leads you to the beauty of form and function. Or conservatism. The conservatism is just the preservation of that order. And that's why it will always win out over leftism and trying to, invent it. Because it can't be invented. It is what it is. And it just is. Leave it alone. Stop trying to fiddle with it and pervert it and drag it down to some weird expectation of what you want it to be. That's That's what you see with identity politics. Oh, you're a different identity, therefore you must have a different way of being. And it's like, no, we're all human beings and we should all be trying to meet the example. And the example is when form meets function, because that is what's beautiful. That's why the left hate guns. Because guns have a certain beauty about them, because they are form meeting function. And they're like, yeah, but they kill people. It's like, yes, but you are supposed to use them in the righteous manner to kill that which tries to destroy others. That's why the only justified killing is the killing of someone who is something that's trying to kill. You know, you are supposed to destroy what is destructive. Yeah, but that's what. What's wrong with the current Conservative government is that they're not being conservative. They are buying into the idea that they can produce what they want the order to be, instead of witnessing that the order is form and function and the preservation of it. That's exactly what isn't conservative about them. They're not trying to conserve. They are trying to manufacture. And they are being left towards trying to manufacture a world order and a way of being. Because they have no self-reflection on what conservatism is. They don't understand it. They just think it's a word. And it's not just a word, it's a word that has a meaning, that produces a concept. And that concept is supposed to be self-judged and empathetically judged to bring them to the revelation that you are supposed to preserve what is most natural in order to bring about the beauty of form and function in humanity. And they've completely forgotten that. Like the idea of borders. Borders have a form and a function. They are a preventative measure to keep out what is destructive, and the beauty that you witness in a border is its function of keeping out the destructive. And what destroys things? People who come in and try to detract from the order, try to disturb it, try to implicate you in their way of life because they think their way of life is better. And it's like, no way of life is better than any other apart from its ability to set an example that creates the beauty of form and function. That's what it all boils down to. And this is where the religious separate from the irreligious. And when you get the anti-theists, you know, or those who don't see God as the example, God being the ultimate example of form meeting function. That's all it is, you know, and it's produced as a concept in one word, because that's what human beings do. We witness things in the context in which they are produced, and then we purport them via the concepts of words. Word. Do you see where I'm? Do you see why I start with that? Why you should start with word? Because word is the concept. That's where we get language from. You know. That's why language was made, to produce these concepts. And the concepts are supposed to be the ultimate form and function. To be that singular, explanation of a larger thing. because it's just easier to communicate it that way instead of having to drag it out by explaining the definition of everything. And that's why most of these debates about everything, turn into an argument about definitions. Because it's like, oh, if we can change the definition, then we can change the outcome. It's like, no, the definition is the form meeting the function of the word. 1 second, I have to flick a switch. Are we there? We're there. Good. Apologies. No, I'll try and. It's inspired me to personify that and, do it linearly in an explanation that I might do a video on. So watch out for that. Because they say that, if we can't explain conservatism in a secular manner, then we're not going to get anywhere because people are going to think that it's born out of religion, and people don't like religion because it's a set way of being. And it's like, it's not a set way of being. It is just a written example of the way things could be if you followed the example of trying to meet form with function. And that's why you should respect your biology and the form of it and act within the function of it and be the example of form meeting function to become, the beautiful example that people want to follow because it's just a naturally produced example of that which is the pinnacle of being. And I think we've reached the ultimate point of everything that ever could be. And if only people would start with that. And I think if I ever have a debate or a discussion with anybody on YouTube, I'll do that first. I'll be like, define beauty. Or like the ultimate example. And then go from there. Because it works both ways. It can work for the positive and the negative. Yeah. You'll get there. But it's just about recognizing that. That's what brings you peace and purpose and a meaning to life. That is the meaning of life, as far as I can see. It is to witness the form of things, it is to witness the function of things, and then to produce the beautiful by trying to make the form as best it can be to meet the function, and making the function of it to be sustaining and life-bringing and non-harmful and an advantage to as many people as it can be. And beauty isn't just art. It has its artistic merit because you can see something and witness it and think, oh, that's beautiful, but and stand in awe of it. Jordan Peterson's covered this many a time, and I can't see why he doesn't come round to his own revelation by the words that he used. He doesn't fulfill that linear line of logic towards that singular point. Comes close to it, but he keeps questioning it. It's like, stop questioning it and just accept it. Accept something. There are things that just are. And old Carl Benjamin Sargon of Akkad, he got it right in that in his talk with Jesse Lee Peterson. If anybody wants to go and watch that. It's like he is almost there when he said that we need a secular way of sort of translating the conservative worldview onto people while leaving the religious bit behind. And it's like, it's just a matter of words. And it's like, if you could think of the most beautiful example of what a man or a woman should be, you should conserve what there is in life that brings that about and brings about the harmony of it. And you shouldn't think of anything as tyrannical unless it's trying to disturb you from reaching it naturally. If it's trying to bully you into achieving it, then you aren't free to achieve it by yourself, and then without the freedom to do it, you are under a fascist order. It was a good talk. I'm glad that I done it, because it covers a lot of things. And you did ask me for, why the left will fail, why the left is perverted. So there we go. I hope that I explained why they are the way that they are, and why it's destined to fail. I can shortly summarise it if you want. They want to pervert things so that nothing that can be great, nothing can be an example of anything beautiful. They want to tear away form and function, and they do it by targeting children, because children are the closest thing to the beauty of form and function you can get, because they haven't been disturbed or perverted or led astray. They just are what they are. They are pure, unfiltered renderings of human beings that know that they should live up to an example, and they follow the example of everything, and they try everything to reach the example of the beauty of form and function. They're like, what should I be? I am witnessing this. If I replicate this, what happens? And that's how you achieve morals and discipline, and how children become respectable adults. And that's the only way that the left will achieve what they want to achieve, when they corrupt everybody into getting rid of their form. And then without a form, the only function that you have is existing. And then to exist, you don't do anything unless someone tells you what the example is. And that's why they treat the state as being the ultimate being that ordains you with everything. They tell you how to be, they tell you what you can do, they tell you what you can say, and they want to establish their law to stop you from breaking out of that. You are not allowed to elevate yourself just through being the example of something better. You are not allowed to be better. Trying to be better is oppressive and fascist, because it shows that someone is not the best. And when you highlight the example of what isn't the best, that's hateful. That's why they invented the term hate speech, because when you point out that something isn't trying to be the best of form and function, and bring about the goodness of humanity, or is an example of exactly the destruction of humanity, then that's hate speech, because you're trying to set an example of what is good and bad. I mean, there should be no example of what is good and bad. There is no best or better or worse. There just is. That blank slate NPC, everybody following the same, regurgitating the same points. And that's why it will fail, because everybody's an individual, everybody has their individual pursuits, and if one person can't be different from any other, then there is no humanity. You might as well be bacteria. And people don't like that, because it takes away the beauty of the world, and the beauty of humanity, and the beauty of trying to set an example, or trying to be anything, or trying to bring about anything in the world. That was a short summary. Hope that explains it. You know, and then if they want to argue, I'm fully open to debating it with them, but they won't win. And I guarantee you of that. Bring any leftist you want to try and challenge that, and they won't be able to. They will get caught in a circle of their own logic. And it will fail. I will show you why leftism will fail, just by talking to a leftist and explaining it that way. That's why leftism despises capitalism. Because, you know, capitalism is in its essential, is the exchange through mutually agreed terms of private property. And they think that private property is exploitative because then if it's yours, no one else has access to it. But everybody has access to achieving it if they show an example of a merit that brings about something beautiful that people aspire to or want and achieve greatness in. Which is why they have to tear down greatness, which is why you can't set the example. There is to be no example. The only example is this ethereal soul separated from any form or function that just is, that just does what it wants. You know, that's what they consider freedom to be. That's why everything is fascist. If there is a form to it, it's fascist. Because it dictates a function. And nothing can have a dictated function just naturally derived from its form. Yeah. And now I'm just going in circles explaining the same point with different words. It's tautology, or whatever they call it. Same argument with two different sets of words. Oh, you're just arguing a circular point and everything comes... Yes. Circle of life that leads us off. You know. So yeah, I think I'm done here. I think I've got out everything that I want to get out and led to an explanation of what that'll do for the world. So give me a thumbs up if you would, if you enjoyed that, you know. Like, share, comment, subscribe, hit that alert bell for future videos. And if you liked it that much that you want to, you know, reward an example of the beauty of form of function, there is a link in the description box where you could make a donation of sorts. Happy days, right? I shall catch people on the flip-flop later. Bye-bye for now. Finding random buttons to try and end things properly so that nothing cogs up. Anyway, waving.